This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode, alongside my co-host Bob Pastorella, we chat with masters of horror about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. And today's guest is Jonathan Janz, the author of books such as Marla, The Siren and the Specter, and The Dismembered. And it has been 4 years since we spoke to Jonathan, but my goodness, was this a fascinating conversation over the course of 3 or 4 episodes, because yes, we spoke to Jonathan for that long. We spoke for almost 4 hours. What you're about to hear, it's not a conventional This is Horror podcast conversation. And perhaps more than any other episode, this episode is not a conventional This is Horror podcast episode. We speak very little about writing, but we do go to some very personal places. Both Jonathan and I talk about some things that we have never spoken about on the podcast before, or on any podcast before. And I think because we go to some painful places, this is going to be difficult listening for some of you. So I'm just making you aware of that from the outset. Now, I've said on the podcast before that I'm going through something, that I have been going through something for the past nearly 18 months now. And in this conversation with Jonathan, I get into that a little bit more. I don't delve into specifics, but I do provide a bit more of an insight as to why the last 18 months have been difficult for me. So you're going to hear that on the podcast. I'm being vulnerable. And in the podcast, we talk about forgiveness, whether that is forgiving ourselves, whether it is forgiving others, whether it is cultivating forgiveness. We also jump into stoicism. We talk a little bit about the joy and the difficulties of having children. And we get into a lot more. So this is a heavy conversation, but hopefully it is going to be one that brings you value in some way. And then for the second and third part, we do get more into writing, literary agents, and all of the stuff that perhaps you are most familiar with This is Horror having. So if you're ready for a journey in terms of personal lives, in terms of vulnerability, in terms of forgiveness, then it's happening. So before we jump in to this very personal conversation with Jonathan Janz, let's have a little bit of an advert break.
Cosmovorous, the debut cosmic horror novel from R.C. Housen. Esmeralda has lived on the fringes of society for as long as she can remember, until a Halloween night gone wrong unlocks a cache of nightmarish memories. Visions of a bizarre desert town, images of a mysterious woman, the pain of an ultimate betrayal, and the shame of a bargain made in blood. Now she must travel back and learn the true nature of the ravenous cosmos. Cosmovorous, available everywhere books are sold.
Hey everyone, this is author Jeff Strand, and I cannot wait to see you at Horror on Main. Remember, attendance is mandatory. Don't make me hunt you down.
Horror on Main, a new weekend convention for the horror community. We explore all the shadows within horror entertainment. From idea to product, there are many people behind the scenes, and we're bringing them to you, as well as contests, movies, panels, podcasters, and much more. We've been going to conventions for over 20 years and are changing up the little things to make the big picture amazing. Join us Memorial Day weekend 2023 in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Come to the block party and meet your new neighbors. See horroronmain.com for details.
Okay, well, with that said, get ready. We're talking forgiveness. we're talking stoicism, we are going to some vulnerable places. Because it is Jonathan Janz on This Is Horror. Jonathan, welcome back to This Is Horror.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you. It has been a little while, but I'm so happy to be back. It is exciting.
Yeah, it has been 4 years, and yeah, seriously.
Wow, that is wild, dude.
I know, and it's not been deliberate that we've had you off the show for so long, but it's so good to have you back. And as I mentioned to you off air, as I've alluded to in previous episodes, the last couple of years haven't been great for me. And I mean, there's been times where I've just wanted to have you back on the show because you instill so much positivity in any conversation you're in. And I have to say that, in interviewing you back in 2018 has been one of the most positive experiences in the entire history of This Is Horror. You've got such a great and optimistic way of looking at even the bleakest of situations. So, I mean, thank you for being that light in this world. And yeah, I'm really excited to see the kind of things that we delve into in this one.
I don't know that we can get any better than what you just said. I think we're good. I mean, let's just go ahead and end it now, because I just feel like there's an episode of Seinfeld where George has like a really wonderful first date, and he starts to think, well, I've got nowhere to go but down now, and so might as well break up, right? Because that's kind of how I feel. That was like the nicest, kindest introduction I've ever had. I loved it, so thank you. And I feel the same way about you guys. It was so much fun 4 years ago. I still don't believe it was 4 years ago. I mean, I believe you. It's just really difficult to actually digest that it was 4 years ago. But
Right.
I just absolutely love talking to you guys. It was so much fun, such a wonderful, enriching experience. And so I am very much looking forward to talking to y'all again. It's gonna be a blast.
Yeah, and I am going to implore listeners, do not turn off, because despite what Jonathan has just said, I think we're going to get even better. I think we're going to have some higher points in this episode. So keep listening. And I mean, talking about the past 4 years, what have been some of the biggest changes for you, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think so. In the last 4 years since we've talked, I've gotten a different agent. I broke up with one agent and then got a different agent. I started working a lot more with a guy that we both know named Ryan Lewis, and Josh Mallerman as well. And those friendships, not only professionally, but I think more importantly for me, those friendships have deepened, which has been
Yes.
really special. And then also professionally, I guess there have been some more things written, some more things published, some more things that will be published. I think you asked personally, and I think that the wildest thing there is, well, there have been a couple. I mean, the negative thing would be that my grandpa, who's like my father figure, he passed on in 2020. But an interesting thing really is that my kids continue to grow, and it's weird. This is pretty vulnerable, I guess, but I don't think I was doing this at the time. I don't know where I got this really awful idea that pills were not good, that people should not take pills for anxiety or for whatever. I think that was just kind of the environment, not my family, but maybe the environment that I grew up in when I was younger. And I really resisted that. But I was having a lot of anxiety about my kids growing up. And so literally I was waking up at 4 a.m. and crying fairly consistently, just feeling like that was I don't know, it was a really traumatic thing, and I started to I finally went to a doctor for it and got medication for it, and I still don't sleep well, but I've been sleeping better than I ever have in my life, which is a big change for me personally. And that also helped me to stop looking at it so negatively. I don't know that it's really, I don't think it's my nature normally to look at things negatively, but that's a pretty negative way to look at, family, is to just look at the passage of time, because there's so many other ways to look at it. So I'd say that change, because I don't even know if we talked about that back in the day in 2018. That was right in the thick of it. That was right when I was really struggling, and I continue to struggle up until like not that long ago. And so when I started to take, and I just take the medication before bed, that's actually helped my mental health quite a bit, my emotional health. It's nothing that I ever really showed to people, but it was something that I was really struggling with. So that's a bit of an overshare. So there we go. That sets a precedent for the night. It is oversharing night with Michael and Bob and John. But there you go. There's that. That's a big change.
Yeah, well, I think This Is Horror podcast is all about the overshare and these real intimate conversations. I mean, we're not afraid to go to those dark places. And I think in terms of the pills and the anxiety, it's interesting to hear that you had a resistance to taking pills, and it's actually something I can resonate a little bit with. So I think in terms of my own experience, so I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but I used to have really bad arthritis to a point where I was taking 10 prescription pills a day. I was injecting myself with methotrexate, which in higher doses is an anti-cancer drug. That was once a week. And I was on a path where I would have been in a wheelchair if I hadn't done something about it. I mean, this is over a decade ago now, but what I effectively did, I mean, I was searching online for different kind of ways to get over this, to find myself in a better way, because I'm effectively being told by my doctors, well, this is just kind of how it is. And it's like, well, taking 10 pills a day, injecting myself once a week does not feel like a recipe for a long life. So
Right.
I rejected that notion. I started researching and trying to find my own way out. And through the paleo diet and essentially cutting gluten and heavily restricting sugar, I rather quickly went from being in agonizing pain and taking all these pills to not having to take a single pill, to feeling much better, and also just being in better physical shape as well, which was never the intention. That was just a kind of welcome bonus. But I think after that happened, I realized, what a superpower it can be to control your diet, and then to a lesser extent the other three pillars of health, which would be fitness and physical exercise, sleep, and stress management. But I think at some point, it almost became a little bit religious, or it felt like, these four things can fix any problem. So I think that, plus the fact that I was terrified of being dependent on pharmaceuticals again, meant that for a number of years, I had a real resistance to taking any pills. Now, I never had a problem with other people taking pills. Of course not. If people suffer from depression or mental health issues or anything, then of course you've got to do what works for you. But for me, I didn't want to take them. I thought, that the nearest I would come is like, well, supplementing with some supplements, with some vitamins, or with some kind of macronutrients and things like that. But the I guess as the years have passed, it's like, no, it's okay to have these health and diet and stress management, sleep, exercise principles, but sometimes, you should use some pharmaceuticals in combination with this. It's okay to kind of take the medicine of old and the medicine of new. This is how we evolved. But
Yeah.
I think particularly as as people who can see the magic of nutrition and of exercising, it can make us, I don't know, be reluctant to take pills, or you can tell yourself a lie, and this is a lie that I would tell myself, and I would not, say this about other people. I can be very hypocritical and harsh to myself in ways that I wouldn't be to others, but I could almost say, if I take the pill, it's easy, or it's cheating, or it's a lazy way out, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
That's just,
Yeah.
is it like if I have to go to Tokyo, I'm like, oh, if you get in the car, that's lazy, mate. Walk it. Take a few days. So there's just some absurdity. I don't know if any of that kind of resonates with you, or if that gets to your own pill anxiety, or if it was a completely different journey for you.
Well, I mean, yeah, I didn't undergo some of the facets of that you talked about. I didn't have the 10 types of medication, and because that, understandably, that would make you reticent to take anything if you've had that experience, and then that fear of it worsening, right? Getting, and injecting yourself and all that stuff. I can really see, like, for me, and I liked what you said, like, you had a double standard that was negative toward yourself. And that was the same way. It's like I never judged other people because it made sense, because there was that objectivity. I could see, okay, it helps that person. Great, good for that person. That person should do it. But when it came to myself, I think what my fear was just I would perceive it as weakness in myself. It's failing. You use the word cheating. There was some of that, like, feeling of some of that disinclination to feel like I was cheating. And I think that ever since, being a really little kid, I didn't want to appear weak. I never wanted people to perceive me as weak. And so I think that I always felt like if I did that, then that would somehow prove that I was weak, which is just complete, ridiculousness. But again, we're not that logical or fair with ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
See, I've got all y'all beat. I take 10 medications a day. Hereditary, genetics. So I've got glaucoma, high blood pressure, which is hereditary, runs in the family, and diabetes. And I've been taking the allergy shots since I was 4 years old. And I quit taking allergy shots. And I don't know, it's like my dad had that thing you're talking about, Jonathan. Taking medicine makes you weak.
Yeah.
He had that. And he didn't try to pass it on to me or my sister. But, I remember even going to school when I was going to college and I was studying psychology, and I discovered that my dad didn't actually believe in any of the things I was learning, because to be called crazy was a weakness. And then, if you had to take any type of medication because you were crazy, you were weak. If somebody in the family was having some anxiety or something like that and they had to take a pill, he would mumble. I can hear him mumble, "Oh, they're just weak." And it's like, man, dude, you got to realize that there are chemical imbalances that happen within our bodies, that can change your behavior. And you don't have any control over it. It's not being weak. It's that the fact that you have no control. Now, once he discovered that he was a diabetic, of course his tune changed, because he was forced to take medication that he had never had to take before. So, I don't feel any weaker. I mean, shit, I'm the oldest person at my job, and I can work circles around the 20-year-olds. And then they're amazed. They're like, we hired some new rookies, and they're all in their 20s, early 20s. And they were like going, "Bob's 55? There's no way he's 55 years old. There's no way." They're like, "Yeah, he's 55." And it's, and then I'm like, then they see me, they're bringing in my insulin and stuff like that. And I'm like, what's that? Like, insulin? What's that for? I'm like, so I can stay alive and eat when I want to eat, when I want to eat, and they're like, you have to take that like every day. I'm like, not every day, but when I need to, I do. And what happens if you don't? Could go in a coma and die. Then you'll have to deal with that while you're at work.
It's for your own good, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I get that. I never experienced what you're talking about, but I had it in my family, and it's, I don't know. It's like we need to step away from that mindset of a weakness, no matter what it is. There's no such thing as being a weakness if we're all human and we're all
Absolutely.
imperfect. We have to make the best out of what we have. And so, man, when you were saying that, it just reminded me of my dad, and went through that for years and years, and but I made a promise that when he had to start taking medication, that I would never call him weak, because I know that would have messed him up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was in bad enough shape as it was.
Right. No, that's absolutely. I think we all to a degree are programmed by our environments, and that was the small town in which I grew up. That was it. It was like, it was such a ridiculously backward view of particularly what a man should be and what manhood was. That was my biological father, who, I mean, this is a really super personal and unpleasant thing, but this is just one little snapshot that'll give you exactly where I think it comes from. And I'm not sitting here blaming anything that's wrong with me on the town or on my biological father or whatever, but I can trace this particular one. But basically, I remember being in his lap when I was about three, 3.5, and he would light matches and hold them up to my face and then bring them closer and closer and tell me not to move. And anytime I flinched, anytime I moved, that was weakness, that was derision, that was more matches. And sometimes he would hold them up and burn my mouth and all kinds of stuff. So I think I can trace it pretty directly to that. But that kind of behavior that he exhibited was exactly what the entire area kind of exhibited, right? It was like so like everything negative that you hear about like patriarchal societies, that. And honestly, I don't think there was that uncommon. I think that was kind of the time period, right? Like what the perception of a man was just so bizarre and toxic and wrong. And so I just think that he probably got carried along with that and bequeathed that to me, and hopefully I break that completely and never ever exhibit any of that, or ever try to make anybody around me feel that way in any way, because obviously it's pretty horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that was your biological father, so I guess from the wording, that would sort of imply that perhaps your main father figure was somebody different. So, I mean, when did you last see your biological father? What was or is the relationship like with regard to him?
Yeah, so there are three figures there, super fast. I'll cycle through them. But the biological father was one. My mom divorced him because of stuff like this. By the time I was like
Mm,
5. So then there was some connection and contact there, but it was always rocky and horrible. And he passed away back in like 2015. We hadn't spoken for about a quarter of a century, by the
mm.
time he passed away. So there's that's actually there's a lot more there that we won't worry about unpacking now. But it's a wild tale. My mom remarried when I was 11 to my stepfather, my former stepfather. She divorced him a couple years ago. Thank goodness. He was never physically abusive, but he was awful, just awful. and so thankful she finally divorced him after 36 years. He was just, just not, anyway, I won't even, he's not even worth my time to talk about. But then the person who is worth talking about is that guy I mentioned, my grandpa. And it's funny, it's like all along I had this perception, that this misconception that there was a part of me lacking because I didn't have a dad in the house. And again, I was programmed to think that you had to have, a mother and a father, and the dad had to play this role and had to teach you these things. And because I was programmed to think that way, I always felt like I was incomplete, and I always felt like I was lacking and was somehow not as good as my peers and stuff. And then, it took me a long time to realize that my father figure, my grandpa, who was such a regular fixture in my life, like we never went more than a few days without seeing each other. I even lived with my grandma and grandpa for periods of time. He he was better than like 99.9% of dads in the history of dads. Like in
Yeah.
fact, I've never heard of a dad that I think, oh, I wish I would have had him instead of my grandpa. I think my grandpa puts them all to shame. That guy was just so awesome. Well, here I'll say this, and then we don't have to talk about that stuff all night, because I know you all want to go on other topics probably. But grandpa, my grandma was married to him for like 60 years. She said that she had never seen him in a bad mood. All right. And that's
Yeah.
something that I don't think most of us can't live up to that, right? In fact, that's a pretty unattainable goal, but it just shows you what a loving guy he was. Every time I saw him, he'd give me a gigantic back-breaking hug and tell me he loved me. And every time I said goodbye to him, same thing. And he'd kiss me on the cheek, and he was so just so loving and so present and so supportive. So, I made myself out to sound like this Dickensian, poor, sad sack kid with a rough life. But honestly, my mom was awesome, my grandma and grandpa, and I even had an aunt. So I had four stable, loving, amazing people around me at all times. Where a lot of people with supposedly stable homes don't really have a tenth of that. So I really had a wonderful childhood for the most part. And my grandpa, I miss him like crazy, but man, what a great guy he was. He was a veteran, and this is Veterans Day. So happy Veterans Day, Grandpa, wherever you are. Well, I think I know where he is, but I'll shut up now. Y'all go ahead.
What a beautiful way to end that segment. And I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about off air when we're talking about gravitating towards the positive rather than fixating on the negative. I mean, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, to some extent, both will exist in everyone's life. And I think, that the fact that you had, these four really positive role models and figures certainly doesn't, undermine that there were some negative and some horrible and some traumatic things that you had had to endure, or had to doesn't even sound right, but you had no choice in the matter, and unfortunately. And I mean, so often in life we have that option. We can either fixate on the positive or we can fixate on the negative. And
Mhm.
the positive, that can be much harder. But I think most of us, in fact all of us, are stronger than we probably realize we are. It's always difficult, to talk about these things without it almost sounding condescending or negative or belittling people who have to deal with these demons. It's
Mhm.
always a tough balance in wording something like this, because
Sure.
it's not to negate that it is a battle, but I mean, the real message is, if you're in that battle, don't give up. Look for the light. And even if you just see a little glimmer, that's enough. One day at a time, 1 minute at a time.
That's right. I believe that. I think anybody who listens to you, to you and to Bob, I think people who listen to you for 10 minutes can understand how genuine that is, and obviously you're sensitive to the suffering of others. I don't think anybody would ever for one moment question that. But I think what you said is absolutely right, because and I think that also that motivates us, hopefully, to try to bring that light as much as we can to other people, when to try to understand, rather than condemn, to try to love rather than hate. Because we can be part of that glow, and somebody needs it, man. You both have suffered before. You know that you need it sometimes. I need it sometimes. We need that glow from other people. So,
Mhm.
man, whenever we can provide it, that's what we absolutely should do.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, throughout the course of this conversation, as well as talking about your books, I want to talk about faith. I want to talk about, very personal issues and battles, as is, of course, the nature of the vast majority of This Is Horror podcast conversations. And I wasn't planning on going this direction so early, but it seems to be where we've arrived at. So, I mean, I wonder, how do you think we go about cultivating forgiveness? And also, what is the difference between forgiveness and not allowing ourselves to be walked all over?
Oh, wow. That second one is tough. That is such a tough one, right? Because it's so easy for it to spill into that, where our good natures are weaponized and used against us. So that's honestly a line I don't know if I can even articulate, it's a line I don't even know if I can recognize sometimes, because that is a challenge. That first part, when you talk about forgiveness, I really think it's so hard. It's so hard to forgive. It's so hard. And sometimes people do wrong us. And I think in those cases, it's really understandable and human to hold on to that pain and to be angry about it. I think this sounds so weird. Okay, so I think this is where art starts to play a role. I think art can bring so many wonderful things into our life, but part of it can be healing. This does. I don't think anybody would ever confuse this with the deepest, most profound show ever written. But I love the show. It's called Cobra Kai, and watching that show with my son and my two daughters, it really has helped me. There's a character in there named Johnny Lawrence. If you've ever seen Karate Kid, he is the villain of the Karate Kid, but he's also kind of the hero slash anti-hero of Cobra Kai. And I think that's the heart of that show, is to see that character, to see how he has changed, to see why he went astray, why he was the way he was, and then how he's trying to become better. I'm not saying that my biological dad was Johnny Lawrence, but here's what's weird, man. I feel like if I had seen that show before my dad passed away, I probably would have reached out to him. And obviously that chance is gone now. I stand by my decision to keep him away from my kids, for the
Mm,
most part, but he was not like, it's not like he was fully formed. He sprouted out of the ground into this person who was abusive to his son, right? Somehow something shaped him into that. This is again pretty personal, but his dad, my grandpa on my dad's side, had horrible experiences in the war, in World War II. Both grandpas were in the war, but that grandpa was in the war, dealt with alcoholism afterward, depression, and took his own life. When my biological dad, I think I was like a baby when that happened. And so I think that had a major effect on my biological dad, when his dad took his own life. And I again, it's not linear. I realize it's not like connecting the dots, this, and this excuses this, and this makes that okay. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that he was a person, and people go through things, and it's really easy for me to just perceive my biological dad as Satan. I think it's a lot probably more. I think it's fairer. I think it's probably more productive to look at him as a human who went through things, and then maybe made some wrong turnings or wrong decisions or had wrong attitudes, but that came from somewhere. And I really, as I look back now, I perceive him more, because he was 21 when he had me. right? I mean, I'm not saying I would have been that way at 21 as a dad, but oh my gosh, at 21 as a dad, I would have been so ill-suited. I feel ill-suited now as a dad sometimes. I can't imagine how overwhelmed I would have been at age 21. So I look back at him and I realize he wasn't meant for that. Certainly not at that time. He wasn't meant to be a dad. He felt trapped. He felt angry. He was reeling from the suicide of his own dad. And I just feel like I can either try to understand him a little bit or I can hate him. And I hated him for a lot of years. Now I think I try harder to understand him. And I think I do to a degree. I think I understand some of the reasons why he was the way he was. And I feel a little sympathy, honestly, for him, even though I disagree with some of the things he did. I don't know, and I just think that's probably the better way to approach it, at least for me. I'm not telling other people to do that, but for me, I think I don't know, that leads to a better emotional health for me. It leads to some healing for me. Anyway,
Yeah, so much of that resonates with me. And when thinking about people who have wronged me in my childhood and beyond, and it's like having that empathy and looking, what is it that shaped them? What is it that, happened to them for them to become that person? And it doesn't excuse bad actions, but it does help paint a narrative and an understanding. And yeah, again, as with for you, it's just helped me, I guess, just understand the picture a little bit better, because I don't think, this world is painted in black and white. There are all sorts of colors, there are all sorts of shades.
hmm
And I think the more empathy we have, the closer we become to getting along, or to peace, or to just kind of understanding why people behave in the way that they do, or why they hold the perspectives and opinions that they do, even if we disagree with them completely. And I think understanding is the key, really, in this world. And I don't believe that anybody is born like truly evil. I just don't think that that is the case. Now, I think there can be arguments, if we delve into the science, that there are people who can be born with a more kind of sociopathic gene. I think that is a thing, but then there are products of the environment that kind of can shape the way in which they might go. And I don't
yes,
think any child is inherently evil. And for me, once I've kind of understood that, it's helped me to do my best to, if not empathize, then to understand people. I suppose that empathize might have been the wrong word initially, because it might mean that I almost relate to the actions. It doesn't mean I relate. It just means I can understand why what happened, while still completely condoning the actions and behavior.
right, right, definitely,
Now,
definitely.
yeah, on the topic of forgiveness, how do we forgive ourselves? Also, how do we forgive ourselves for poor actions if others don't? And should we forgive ourselves if others don't? Is it our place to do so?
That's a man. You're going deep. I love it though. I think that that's one of the hardest things to do is to forgive oneself because I think that for those of us who do try to care about other people, who do try to feel what they feel and understand them, that means that we have a greater understanding of how pain feels when it's inflicted.
Mm,
And no matter how kind we try to be, no matter how considerate, we all make mistakes. We do. It is the human condition to screw up, and we all do. No, the nicest people in the world screw up sometimes, and they say thoughtless things, or they make selfish decisions. And then when you have done one of those things, sometimes maybe consciously, often unconsciously, I think then you realize, because you know what it feels like to hurt, and you realize that you're the author of that pain for someone else. I think that's a really, really difficult thing to deal with. It's a really difficult thing to process, and then an even harder thing to actually get to a place where you let it go and forgive yourself. And you talked about others forgiving you. That helps, but it doesn't go all the way. There's still that extra step, and that's actually a place where that I haven't like achieved. This is just a stupid example, but and it's another place where the medication helps, because for the longest time, for every morning when I would shower, every shower there would be this stroboscopic flicker of mistakes that I'd made in my life, over and over and over,
Mm.
that just assaulted me like that spray of hot water. It would be those images assaulting me, every mistake, and that would be every morning of my life. And then the medication has actually helped that a lot. Not that I don't ever replay it now, but I used to replay it every morning, and they still hit me at weird times. I remember when I was coaching girls basketball, there was a really amazing human being. She was on my team. She's this superb human, great kid. I didn't play her a lot because she wasn't our most talented kid. We were having a really bad game. She went in, she made 2 turnovers in like 10 seconds, and it was right before half. And at halftime, I was like ranting and raving, and I'm like, and this other kid, I'm like, you need to do better at this. And I looked at this girl and I said, and you, I can't play you. I can't play you if you're going to throw the ball away like that. And then I went on. And even as I said it, it's like I pulled out like in a cinematic way, and I looked at myself. I'm like, you're a horrible human being for saying that to this amazing, sweet, hardworking kid. How dare you? Even at the moment I said it, I knew how awful it was. And
Mm.
I apologized. I apologized to her after the game. I apologized. I've apologized to her. We're friends on Facebook. We still talk sometimes. I've apologized to her probably 3 or 4 times, just private message. I mean, guys, this was 2006, I think, that this happened. But I've apologized multiple times, just because I'm still so angry at myself for letting my competitiveness and my frustration and my temper boil over, and saying to her, I can't play you, you can't turn the ball, whatever. It was so awful, and she didn't deserve it. And so I haven't forgiven myself for that. And she's forgiven me. She forgave me. She probably forgave me in the moment, because she's such an amazing human being, like heart of gold, brilliant, wonderful mind, wonderful kid. She probably forgave me as soon as the words were out of my mouth, because in the sum of our time together, I was really good to her. I treated her super well. I worked super hard to be a good coach for her and a good teacher for her. I had her in class. We had a wonderful relationship. I'm still friends with her parents. So I'm sure she probably forgave me right away. And anytime I brought it up since then, it's like I can almost hear the laughter in her voice. Coach, let it go, let it go. But still, for me, I'm like, you are such a prick. What's wrong with you? How dare you say that to that kid? So I think that forgiving ourselves might be the highest mountain to climb. And if you two figure it out, tell me, because I still haven't. The medication helps me not linger on it as much, but I still haven't.
I would say, in response to that, I mean, in terms of my opinion of you, in terms of everyone who talks about Jonathan Janz, I mean, you're one of the most loving, kindest, most compassionate people, not just in the genre, but on the planet. You're always doing the best that you can in each moment. And I mean, I want to know why you can't forgive yourself for this, but I mean, I kind of think I know the answer. And it's something that a lot of us deal with anyway, where your standards are too high, and for whatever reason, you're almost expecting perfection from yourself. But we know that as humans, we are inherently flawed. We know that we fuck up. We know that we make mistakes. And, in that moment, something took over. And as you said yourself, almost seconds later, your true nature, the real Jonathan Janz, the real Craig that I know you are, snapped you back to reality and course corrected and told you this was not the right thing to do. And this happens throughout our lives. You know, we will snap or something will happen. And then, you know, we apologize when we can. Hopefully, as we get older, and as has been the pattern for me, that time between action and apologizing is a lot quicker now than it was when I was younger. And I just think we continue to improve, we continue to get a little bit better, but you can't put perfection as the standard that you expect of yourself. This happened in 2006. You acknowledge that it wasn't the best way to behave. You've apologized to the person in question. She has forgiven you. Everyone thinks that you're an amazing person. I think you owe it to yourself to forgive yourself. And I just wish that there was something I could do that would allow that to happen, because I know what it's like to be kept up, to be haunted by your mistakes, to wake up in the night and to remember something that you did a decade, 2 decades ago, and to hate yourself and to berate yourself. But when you look at it logically and you step away, you know that it's not right. You know that you wouldn't do that to another person. So why do we do it to ourselves? And we need to stop. And I wish that I could do that for you. I wish I could give you a bloody big hug now, because you don't deserve to put yourself through that pain. And I know that if the student is listening, then she wouldn't want you to either. And you're loved, and sometimes you just gotta love yourself a little bit more.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. Thanks. Well, you're loved too, and that was I appreciate it. That was touching. Like, and that sounds like a worn expression, but it's very true. It was, and I do appreciate it. Ha 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 ha.
Please consider forgiving yourself. Please muse upon it. Please think about your character, and don't let those demons that I know will creep in and will be like, oh, well, what about the time you did that? Oh, you haven't told Michael about that little indiscretion or that little moment of anger. Look at the overall character. Remember that you're inherently flawed. That is the design, unfortunately, of humans.
Yes, it is, man.
Just know that you're doing your best, and please consider forgiving yourself.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Bob, you said you related to that too. Sounds like Michael sure does. You relate to that as well?
It's, I mean, I think a small part of it is that old school Catholic upbringing, and we must make a penance, which is, like I guess a pretty word for punishment. And, to me, I think that sometimes that forgiving ourselves rids us of a punishment that we've come to not enjoy, but we've gotten used to. And it's a familiar feeling. And in a weird way, it's like to do away with that is a change that some people, don't want to acknowledge.
Right.
I suffered and still do from punishing myself because of mistakes I've made. And some of the punishments are so silly. And it's like I forgave myself one of my punishments this year. And so, I mean, and not to get into like real heavy duty details and things like that. I'll tell you, just kind of give you an idea how silly it is. is I forgave myself of one of my punishments, and now I can wear a watch. So we'll just leave it at that. But that's how silly these things can be, and how they like Michael said, they're like demons in your head.
Yeah.
And you have to, so I come from a long line of my own doing, of beating myself up over stuff. I did something, 10, 12 years ago that was pretty horrific, and people got hurt, and two people got hurt, and one person has forgiven me and the other person has not. And so, talking about how can I forgive myself when someone else won't forgive me? It's a constant battle. And because we want to change, and we should want to change. We should want to become better people. So like when Michael said, that we're striving for this perfection that doesn't exist anyway, but in our head, it's part of that vicious cycle. So it's and I think that there's a real arrogant way of looking at it. It's like, well, you know what? I'm going to forgive myself, even if that guy won't forgive me, his loss. But he has lost some things. Right. So that's the bitter reality of it.
Man.
I think on the topic of forgiveness, it reminds me that I, a few years back, was dealing with something that had happened in my childhood, and I was holding on to resentment and anger about this particular situation and behavior. And kind of what I wanted to be able to move on was to have some sort of apology or admission from the person who had wronged me that what they had done was not okay. That was all I really wanted, but it just wasn't forthcoming. And I spoke to a member of my family about this and about what had happened. And they said to me, your own peace cannot be contingent on the actions of someone else. If I want to forgive this person, then I can forgive them, but I should not allow my own happiness to be controlled by how another person does or does not behave. And that revelation was very freeing for me to realize that, I have the power to forgive on my own, but I can't control what another person does, and I can't expect it of them. I think, too, with this particular incident and person, the person is very kind of private, and the type of person who to admit to wrongdoings would almost make it real in their mind. But if they don't admit, then it almost means it didn't happen. It's a very old school kind of way of looking at it. And I can say with reference to that, I have forgiven them, and things are a lot better now. And I think that whilst there hasn't been an explicit apology, I think through actions and conversations, there has been an implicit acknowledgement of what happened. But the big takeaway is, of course, what I started with, which is do not let your own peace be contingent on the actions or inactions of another person.
That makes sense. Bob, what do you think about that? Does that resonate with you?
Oh yeah. Forgiveness is it's such a multifaceted thing. I've gone through like long periods of my time holding grudges on people, And I learned from a really, really good friend who told me, she said that you don't really have to hold these grudges. You just, you can let them go. That doesn't mean that you have to be friends with anyone. Quit being miserable and cut them from your life.
Mm.
And that has served me well, especially if the friendship that I was extending before being betrayed was not reciprocated.
Mm.
So, and there are people, like there's people in my family that I love everyone in my family. I love them all with all of my heart, but I don't like them. So there's some people I do not like. and I used to wrestle with that, and I don't wrestle with that anymore because I don't like being miserable. And I see that they unfortunately are petty and love misery. Misery loves company. So it's, but the power of forgiveness is strong. It helps us. I don't think it necessarily helps other people. I think it's designed to help us move on. And that's really, to me, that's what it's all about. Um, and like I said, I do. There's someone in this world who I did something to who will probably never forgive me, and I can choose to make that a crutch, or I can tell myself, hey, you know what? It's okay. You've taken things and done what you could do for that person, and you have to just move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, relating to that, we cannot, unfortunately, revise the past. Whatever
Right.
has happened has happened, and all you can do is you can shape your future actions.
Mm-hmm.
That
Absolutely.
that really is what it comes down to.
Right.
Very true. Very true.
And I mean, in a sense, it does bring to mind a Stoic quote from Seneca, where he says, "But life is very short and anxious for those who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future."
Mm. And that hits.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing to remember. Man, that's a good thing to remember.
So true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, people know that this is horror conversations are wide, but at this point, and probably about 40 minutes ago, we've just embraced the fact that part one of this conversation is about the incredibly personal. We we have not really jumped into the books yet, so I mean, I promise for our listeners that will feature in part two. Don't worry about that. But I do think from the feedback that we get that people appreciate us going in these directions, that there will be
Mm-hmm.
a warning, as it were, in the intro to the first half. This is the personal part of the catch up with Jans. If you just wanted the books, then part two is the one for you. But I mean, of course, you said that, you had a lot of this anxiety because of your kids continuing to grow because of the passage of time. Have you been able to pinpoint or to muse upon what is it specifically about that has been such a source of sadness for you?
Yeah, I think that there's got to be. I mean, it's all born of love for them, but there has to be a little bit of selfishness in there too, because I feel like they're all three going to be happy. They're all three. I'm not saying they're perfect, obviously. They all have their challenges just like we all do, but I think they're all three on very good paths and have. I really have faith and trust in the fact that they're going to have really good lives. I think that what it boils down to, and maybe this sounds selfish, I don't know. It's also love too, but it's like I mean, I love my wife so much, and so basically, if I had, I'm not gonna rank my favorite people, but I have four people that are my favorite people, right? And they're tied for number one. It's my wife and my three kids. They're tied for number one, and but the love that you have for a child is very unique, and it was like when I didn't know that I was incomplete. First of all, like my wife, I'm so much better with her than I ever was alone. So she definitely made me more complete. And so I guess that part happened when I was 30, but then when I was 31 we had our son, and then I think that was like, and I'm not saying that I'm complete as far as a finished product. I'm a great guy. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that I didn't realize how incomplete I was until we had our son, and then of course our two daughters. And it's this indescribable love that I felt. And I just remember holding him in the hospital and weeping. I couldn't describe. I had never imagined that I could feel that way. I never imagined that I could have that much desire to protect, that much just sheer joy to be close to, that much those feelings of inadequacy, like I don't deserve you, you're too amazing. But like that moment, like in the moment I felt that, on some level I started to be afraid to lose it. I started to be afraid of not having this precious, amazing person with me. And of course, I feel the same way about my two daughters. And again, that sounds selfish or clingy or whatever, but it's born of just this intense, incredible love where you feel like your life has reached this place that you never thought it could or would. You didn't know it existed without them. And then now that you know this love, now that you know this closeness, now that you know this completeness, you don't want to ever be without it. And you don't want to even be distanced from it. Because like even like last night, my middle child, Jewel, and I spent time with each one of the three, but I was just thinking last night, Jewel plays that Wordle game, whatever that is with
Yeah.
the 5 letter words. And so we've
Yes.
just taken to, she gets on her phone and we lie there together on the couch, or like last night we were lying up here in my bed, and and like we were just looking at her phone trying to guess the words, and it was so much fun. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. And I think that there's that, whatever that you talk about, a design flaw, there's that piece of me that just loves that so much that I never want it to go away. And I know at some point, right, she's gonna go away to college, and then probably find a significant other and all that stuff. And I want that for her. Of course I want that for her. I want that with all my being for her. I just want to be a part of it. I just want to be with her too. And I know the thing is, my grandpa, I talk about him, I know he felt the same way, because he was always supportive. But I remember there was a time I never moved away from him very far. Like the farthest away we ever lived was like a half hour. And I remember there was a time that I was talking about going to grad school, like on the East Coast. I live here in the Midwest. And he wasn't outwardly protesting, but he got quiet, and I just sensed that something was amiss. And I don't think I ever really realized what it was until I had my own kids. I'm like, oh, that's what he was feeling. He was just sad. He was sad. He didn't want me to go away because we have so much fun together. Anyway, I guess I probably sound simplistic and selfish, but those are kind of the feelings I have, or at least part of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate so much with what you're saying. And there's something that I want to say, but I'm not sure about saying it on air. but I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to say it and then I'll see how I feel when it comes to editing. But I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
moment that my daughter was born, that was the absolute best moment of my life.
Mm.
I felt such a happiness and such a love that I didn't even realize I was capable of feeling. And
There's a new
it was
part of
just really incredible. And I've always been cognizant of not taking a single moment with her for granted. And as people know, because I've mentioned it before a couple of years ago, me and my ex, who I have my daughter with, we split up. And then 17 months ago, I saw her for the last time. And I remember the night that I was with her, and she was lying in bed next to me. And I gave her a hug and I kissed her head. And I don't never take a moment like this for granted, because one time, something that you do with your child or with anyone is going to be the last time, you know? And that was the last time I saw her.
I love you, man.
And I miss her so fucking much. I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be sorry, man. We love you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
We love you, brother. And it's the truest thing in the world. And what you're saying, man, it's the most, the core, this thing that you feel deep in the core of your soul. That's where
Mm-hmm.
that's coming from. That love that you have for her is this elemental thing, right? This thing that's just all consuming, more powerful than, I think it's more powerful than any negative emotion in the universe, that love that you're
Mm-hmm.
talking
Mm-hmm.
about.
Mm.
I wish I could hug you right now, man.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Thank you.
well, I mean, just even the way you describe it, that's exactly how, like, if someone were to write it, that's how they would write it. You talk about
Mm-hmm.
kissing your head, right? That's exactly what
mm,
you do. Just cherishing. It's just pure love, pure, untinctured by any negative thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
just pure love. It's the most beautiful thing I think in the universe. What you described,
mm,
that moment with her, as you're lying next to her. I don't think there's anything pure or more wonderful than that.
mm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know if I'm keeping that in. I was maybe going to it a bit before I was incapable of finishing my sentence.
Well, I thought it
I
was
don't know.
beautiful.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Mm. I thought it was real. It was, I don't.
It was
I don't.
definitely real.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't have any children, but you know, this whole thing it chokes me up,
Mm,
and that's raw. You know, that's not even the right word. It's just I don't know. I
I
feel
think
for
it's
you,
one,
man.
yeah, and I think it's one of the hardest things that anybody could ever have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that, when we truly, deeply, unconditionally love somebody, like you obviously love her, I think
mm,
I think there's just there's no way to fake that. There's no way to mitigate those feelings. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I, you feel how you feel, and I'm sure that I thought it, when you talked about it, it's just, it's one of the most painful things anybody could express, but it's also one of the most beautiful things that anybody could
mm,
express. Because,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many people who honestly I think they show by their actions that they don't feel that way. They should feel that
Mm.
way, but not everybody feels that way. There are plenty of people who that part is like missing, or that part is maybe blunted or incomplete, or maybe their self-love is greater than their capacity to love somebody else. But like that kind of just deep, beautiful love that you have for her, I think that's because of who you are. That's because of your heart. Because you've got, and I've known this for a while. I knew this from 2018. You've got a beautiful heart, and I think that it just shows. I mean, it's like clearly she has, she is a piece of you. She is a piece of your heart and your soul, and always will be, always will be.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, life and love is messy, it's complicated. I've not shared on air that I haven't seen my daughter for 17 months. That's all I am willing at this stage to say about that. Of course, I miss her every day. Of course, I think about her every day. And, in a way, I'm so glad that I had that absolute clarity of thought on that day. I mean, there's something poetic about it, really, that I thought, do not take any moment for granted, because it might be the last time. And then for that chapter, it happened to be. And of course, I live in hope that I will see her again. We will find out. But whatever happens, I've got 3 years of beautiful moments and memories with her, and whatever happens, I'm here for her. So
Yeah.
if I don't see her for a long time, then I'm here. I'm easy to find. So
Yeah.
we will see what happens. But everything that we've discussed in the podcast prior to this is completely true. I think we just need to act with more empathy and with more love. And when things happen, most people are trying their best, as flawed as it might seem, as flawed as the actions might seem. And a lot of us, we have pain, or we're afraid, and we're all trying our best. That's all I can really say about it.
Yeah. Well, I wish we were in the same country right now. This is one of those moments where we need to be at a convention together. You need to be in Williamsburg with us, and we need to be sitting around, and so I can give you a backbreaking hug here. Oh man. Well, I really believe, we both know that the feelings you're describing are eternal, and they're going to be there. Like your feelings are there, and I believe, I don't know anything, but I believe that will end up becoming a better situation.
Yeah. So for people listening, don't take any moment or any person for granted. Hug and kiss those that you love, assuming they're on board with that. Like, I don't know, if Bob was next to me and I give him a kiss on the forehead, if, make sure he's okay with that first. But just don't take anyone for granted. Forgive quicker, let things go, be short to lose. Is it short to lose your temper? I mean, don't lose your temper a lot. I don't know. Words are not coming out as we get towards the end.
You've given me a long list of things to work on.
It's not meant to be homework.
I I tend, I don't know. I think that's my new thing that I need to really work on. Is I lose my temper a lot, and especially at work. It's like when it's some of the stuff that we have to do is mind numbing. You have to do it multiple times. It's like, why doesn't this work? And it can get frustrating, and there's been we've had some trying times, and I've lost my temper. And I'm sure I've pissed people off, and okay, I'm sorry. I really am, but yeah, frustration can make you very short-tempered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it can.
I just think, as I said before, it's getting that little bit better, with each day, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that you're trying your best and being kind to yourself, going easy on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate for the listeners that this has probably not been the easiest of This Is Horror podcast episodes to listen to. There's been a distinct lack of dick jokes. Really, we needed Gemma more to talk more about fucking drawing dicks in the sand and stuff like that. Maybe I can just put a quick audio bite of that. But yeah, I do hope that despite the fact that we've spoken about some incredibly deep and dark and personal topics, that you're still going away with a message of love and a message of positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, I think the darkness accentuates the light. I mean, if you can take, and I just listen to you, Michael. It's really, I mean, it's one of those. It's a word that's gonna. I hate the way it sounds, but it's sincere, and I'm being sincere. But it really is inspiring, because like everybody goes through things, everybody goes through challenges, but the challenge you're describing is not one that I think most people have to endure,
Mm-hmm.
or can even begin to fathom how difficult it is, and I just, you still, like when I talked to you in 2018, there's this light that is shown in your voice and in your attitude, and it is undimmed. It is completely unchanged
Mm-hmm.
from what it was, and that's really rather remarkable. I think just like a modicum of what you've been through would be enough to completely douse the light in many, 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 many people.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be totally justified in any bitterness or frustration or negative. And I'm sure you feel negative things sometimes. Obviously, you're a person, you're not a robot. Of course, you feel negative things sometimes. But I do think your global viewpoint is still one of positivity, one of love, one of empathy. And I think that's really extraordinary and wonderful. And, if I were listening to this, just coming to this podcast for the first time, I'd be inspired. I'm inspired, and I'm in it. So if I were just listening to it, I'd be even more so.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and all I can say is that I'm doing my best, and I certainly don't want to kind of ever put myself up as a figure for people to aspire to be like, and any kind of positive traits of me. It's taken work to cultivate that over years. It's taken recognizing flaws of myself. I've messed up so many times. I've done things that I'm not especially proud of. I kind of have those nightmares and those echoes of mistakes of the past, much like you described earlier. And so, who I am today is the kind of result of decades of trying to self-improve, trying to be a better person. And it doesn't mean that I haven't messed up. I have messed up. I've made plenty of mistakes. But I just try to be a better person every day at a time. And there's some people who are going to think that I am. There's other people who are not going to think that I am. And like I said before, we can't have our own happiness or our own peace be contingent on others. That's kind of got to come from within. I mean, I was actually saying I said to my girlfriend the other day, I said, I'm sorry if ever, like I'm angry or negative or lose my temper about something. And she looked at me and she was like, of all the time we've been together, that has not happened once. And actually
Wow.
that blew my mind, because like this is what I've been working on for years. And I have people from my past who would say the opposite, who would throw all sorts of kind of hate and negativity against me. But if a person who I've been with over a year of my life has said like, okay, well, you've basically not lost your temper or been negative in all of that time, then I can feel like, well, whatever has happened in the past, it sounds like I'm slowly getting towards becoming the person I would like to become. I don't say that as like some weird kind of boast or anything like that. I
No,
was
dude,
just kind of baffled by that.
there's nothing self-aggrandizing in any of what you said or any of your attitude. I think that would be the last thing, right? Like, it's just this complete sincerity and humility that I sense from you. But I think that you did, even though that one fact is complimentary toward you, I think that it is absolutely a sincere and true one. If anybody would know you well, it's the individual that we're talking about, who's been with you
Mm,
all this time. And I think
mm.
that the fact that the fact that I think her testimony, her experience, I think that that should be pretty validating for you. I think that should show you exactly how you've been, how you conduct yourself, and how you treat others. I mean, I think that's about as clear a statement as to your character as anyone could ever have.
Yeah. And I guess the takeaway that I want listeners to have, and a takeaway for you as well, personally, based on the coach comment. So we are going to sometimes come back to that. And the takeaway is that, sometimes the negative way in which we can see or perceive ourselves is not the way that others see us. And, a timely reminder for us to be kind to ourselves, to treat ourselves with the kindness that we treat others, or that we would treat others.
Absolutely. Absolutely, my friend.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast with Jonathan Janz. And I'm a little nervous to have put that out there. I have deliberately not spoken about what's going on at the moment. And even in that conversation with Jonathan was vague as to the specifics, but it felt right to tell people that I haven't seen my daughter for 17 months now, nearly 18 months, because I'm sick of hiding that fact. And, when the time is right, I may get into specifics, but it's been incredibly difficult and painful. I miss her a lot, and I hope that I get to see her soon. I hope that this awful situation that is ongoing is resolved. So thank you for listening to that episode, for allowing me to be vulnerable with you on the podcast, and hopefully there will be good news in the not too distant future. But as I said with Jonathan, and as I say to many people, whatever life throws at me, I try to do my best. I look at what the positives are, and I try to concentrate on those rather than fixating on the negative. is not always easy. And I can't change the past, I can't control the actions of others, but I do have control over the present moment to a certain extent. And when I have moments of joy, when I have glimpses of joy, I think if I can have one moment, I can have other moments. And sometimes that is what you need. You just need that little light. And you keep going. And despite there being a lot of pain in my present, there is joy. There are moments of light as well. And so I want people to know that. I want people to know that I do have good things going on, such as the podcast, such as my writing, such as a great community of friends, a lot of support, a wonderful girlfriend. So things will get better. And as Laurel Hightower has often quoted to me, and as it was said by John Lennon, things will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And so remember, if you're not okay, then it is not the end. Things will get better. Well, I promise you that the next episode with Jonathan Janz is a little lighter. There are more jokes in it. It might not be Gemma Moore level, drawing dicks in the beach kind of humour, but we have some laughs. It's a pretty good time. We get into some writing as well. We talk about literary agents and screenwriting. And if you want to get that ahead of the crowd, and if you want to support the podcast and to help me out in this difficult time, then do consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thisishorror. If you've got a story that you'd like to get into shape and you're looking for a freelance editor, then consider me. Check out my rates, michaeldavidwilson.co.uk/editing. Drop me a line, michael@thisishorror.co.uk. Similarly, if you would like to advertise on This Is Horror podcast, please do drop me a line, michael@thisishorror.co.uk. And speaking of advertising, let's have a little bit of an advert break.
Horror on Main, a new weekend convention for the horror community. Exploring all the shadows of horror, our guests include writers and actors, but also artists, publishers, directors, composers, and more. We've been going to cons for over 20 years and are changing up the little things to make the big picture amazing. Beyond guests, contests, movies, panels, and podcasters, our layout and programming are designed to further incorporate the very idea of community. Join us Memorial Day weekend 2023 in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Come to the block party and meet your new neighbors. HorrorOnMain.com.
Cosmovorous, the debut cosmic horror novel from R.C. Housen. Esmeralda has lived on the fringes of society for as long as she can remember, until a Halloween night gone wrong unlocks a cache of nightmarish memories. Visions of a bizarre desert town, images of a mysterious woman, the pain of an ultimate betrayal, and the shame of a bargain made in blood. Now she must travel back and learn the true nature of the ravenous cosmos. Cosmovorous, available everywhere books are sold.
Now, something that has always been a popular feature of This Is Horror is the This Is Horror Awards. And the shortlist for the This Is Horror Awards 2021, because, we run them the year after so that we've looked at the entire year. Well, that will be announced this week. It may even have been announced at the time that this is going live. It's going to be close. So it's either been announced or it will be announced imminently. So do check those out on the website, thisishorror.co.uk/awards, and vote for your favorite horror of last year. We got so many great categories, including Novel of the Year, Short Story Collection of the Year, and even podcast categories for fiction and non-fiction. And, if you haven't read everything or you haven't listened to everything on the list, I think that these awards every year, they serve as a pretty great reading and listening list. So do certainly check out those who are up for an award. And you've got time to read and to listen to things because we're giving you about a month this year to vote. And Oh, it's always an exciting time for me as well. So I can't wait to see who wins each category. And then, of course, to host the This Is Horror Awards special podcast. So it's going to be great fun, and there's going to be some really great conversations and good episodes coming out as a result of those awards as well. And talking of good episodes coming up, after the Jonathan Janz conversations, we've got episodes with Brian Asman. We talk about his latest Christmas novella, as well as the positively viral Man Fuck This House. And we're also going to be talking very soon indeed to John Niven, great author, someone who reminds me a little bit of the likes of Martin Amis and Will Carver and Irvine Welsh, but completely his own. He's got books such as Straight White Male and Kill Your Friends. Stephen Stilfox, man, that character. And also The Amateurs, which is the best book I've ever read that combines golf and Tourette's. It might admittedly be the only book, but it's a bloody good book. I do recommend that you check that out. I do recommend that you check out John Niven. And with that said, it is time for me to bid you adieu. So until next time, take care of yourselves, be good to one another, read horror, keep on writing, and have a great, great day.
This is Horror Podcast.